everyone. I want to share with you a little bit about the life of Dorothy Sterling, who wrote Freedom Train, the story of Harriet Tubman. And whenever we introduce an author to you, our goal is to bring that person to life a little bit, right? So that they come off out from behind the story that they wrote and become a real person to you. These authors lived whole lives beyond the things they wrote about. And it's really a fun experience to dig around and discover things about them that are interesting or surprising or just cool. So, that said, I want to share with you 6 interesting things to know about Dorothy Sterling. First of all, she was the daughter of German immigrants who arrived in New York City around the turn of the century. And that may not seem that interesting to you. After all, everyone's got to come from somewhere. But for some reason, I had assumed that Dorothy Sterling was African American, not German American. Maybe just the way she wrote and talked about Harriet Tubman and other brilliant men and women who were Black and all the things she did to promote the civil rights movement. But her parents immigrated from Germany, and she was born in Manhattan in 1913. Her last name was Dennenberg then. Sterling is her married name. Secondly, she was asked to leave her school when she was young. But it was for a good reason. She was asked to leave school in order to be placed in a special class for gifted students at a school further downtown. Yep, she was super smart and a really great student. And she ended up going to very top schools and headed into a career in journalism. She wrote for Time and Life magazines. But ultimately, the number 3 interesting thing is that she was really frustrated in this situation at the way things were. And that changed her life and the lives of others as well. In the 1940s, you see, Miss Sterling worked for Life as a researcher, but she found herself in a system in which women, as researchers, fed material to men, information and things that they would research, who got the bylines. That means that they got their name on the article and they got the credit for it. And as you can see here, these women are doing the research and they're looking through, making phone calls and getting all the information needed to write articles, and then they're giving that information to men. And she didn't feel that that was fair. So she left in the early 1950s. She left writing for magazines and she began writing books for children, starting with this book, Sophie and Her Puppies, which was a little story about the family dogs, which just goes to show, of course, that you can start anywhere, right? But she was determined to write the biography of a strong woman who could inspire girls, not just to write about dogs. She wanted to write something that would matter. And she found her way to Harriet Tubman through this research. And she discovered a whole new field of research, learning and writing about the lives of strong, courageous men and women who fought to end slavery in various ways. And this is when she felt she had become an author. She was 40 years old. And she later wrote, "I was excited, but also bewildered and angry. Why had I never heard of Harriet Tubman, or Sojourner Truth, or Frederick Douglass, or William Lloyd Garrison?" Here was a wealth of information, dozens of inspiring stories to tell to young readers. She wrote Freedom Train just as the civil rights movement was gaining momentum, and then her research led to more books. In fact, she became one of the most prolific authors of works, that means she wrote a lot, of African American history. First for young readers with books like Mary Jane, the first book about a young African American girl growing up in the South. But that's not all she wrote about. As a mom, she was answering lots of questions about the natural world from her curious young kids. And she found that she had a passion for caterpillars. And other bugs too, and also for trees and flowers and mushrooms and mosses and birds. And so she wrote about those things too. Several of her books are about the natural world. This one here is one of my favorites because I have a soft spot in my heart for blue jays. But she also loved a great mystery story, like maybe a lot of you guys do. How many of you like Scooby-Doo or the Hardy Boys or even Sherlock Holmes? Well, she liked those stories too. And she also wrote several mysteries for children, like The Secret of the Old Postbox and The Silver Spoon Mystery, and mysteries about scouts like the Brownie Scout Mystery and the Cub Scout Mystery. And of course, like every good mystery writer, she wrote about a creepy old empty house. So Dorothy Sterling wrote mainly about three things. She wrote about Black history and civil rights, over 30 books in all. She wrote about the natural world, and she wrote mysteries for children. But her last book, her very last book, wasn't specifically about any of these things. At the end of her life, she wrote about her own story in an autobiography. That's a book that you write about yourself. It's called an autobiography. And she wrote about the causes that she cared about and her struggle to be a writer and a mother and a journalist and an activist all at once. And she juggled a lot of things. And this last interesting thing is that she is to this day a hero of shell fishermen. This was one of the causes that she stood for, and it was about the rights of fishermen to have access to the beaches where she lived on Cape Cod. At the end of her biography, she tells a story of how the shellfishers in her home weren't allowed to use the beaches by the people who owned the land in front of their big homes. And she was a beachfront landowner herself, and she made a big difference just by taking a stand and allowing the oystermen to use her right of access, even though her neighbors wouldn't. And she changed the tide, so to speak. And other homeowners have since done the same, and to this day, the stretch of beach at the end of her road is officially called, get it? Sterling Path, right? So there you go. There you go. There are 6 interesting things about Dorothy Sterling that maybe will inspire you to follow your interests and let your passions lead to great writing and do whatever you can do to make a difference, even if it's right in your own backyard.